Hi everyone, my name is Sam from D&D Newbie Sessions, and this is the official D&D Newbie Sessions podcast. I'm here with Dave from the D&D actual play web series Careful Cantrip.
Hello, everyone.
First off, thanks for being here, Dave. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
And tonight we're going to be talking about your web series, how it started, bunch of different questions, just to basically get to know you and the actual like web series that you're creating here.
Okay.
And if
Well,
you're
I am a Leo. I like long walks on the beach. uh,
Nice, I got all those questions covered. Let's see, if you're watching live on Twitch, feel free to put some questions in there. I will be, kind of periodically checking over there to see if anyone's got a question they want to throw in or a comment or something like that. And then if you are watching on Twitch and at some point you need to like leave or you want to come back and watch it again later, there will be a copy uploaded to our YouTube channel as well, so you can check it out there. And I think that's all the like housekeeping type stuff. So I figured a good place to kick us off would be, if you can, without spoilers and stuff, kind of just give us a high level, overview of Careful Cantrip, the world you're creating, the story and stuff like that. Like,
of course.
If the people from my community, they might not have ever watched it. So like, what would you say to them? Kind of like, what's the pitch?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, everyone who's watching, thank you once again for coming and staring at my dumb face. I always appreciate it, although I have no idea why people do. I do appreciate it very much, and thank you, Newbie Sessions, for allowing us to come on and chat a little bit. Always love talking D&D. So just to start off and preface with everything. So just to give you kind of a little bit of an overview of Careful Cantrip. We're a live play D&D group, like so many others these days. Really, where we kind of take a bit more of a different turn, if you will, is we've really highlighted more of the cinematic approach of D&D. We kind of try and think of it in our own minds as our own little Disney world, if you will, as opposed to the extreme crunchy stuff that you sometimes see out there. So we're really focused on being a show, giving a really good insight to ourselves, our characters, and our players as much as possible with our audience, as well as tons of audience participation in some of our other shows. So yeah, that's really where we kind of are trying to take the overall series. The series itself is based on a homebrew world of myself that I call Bastia. Right now, our players are mostly playing on the continent of Qatar, and it's very, very jungly, very ruins, a lot of coastal cities, things along those lines. And really, we're the themes overall of everything is it's very Indiana Jones-esque, if you will. So
Cool.
we're going to be there's lots of MacGuffins to go find. There's going to be those rivalries and whatnot as we go through. It's just it was a little bit outside of your typical medieval fantasy sword and board kind of thing, and we like playing with a lot of things that way. We like finding the outskirts and the outliers of D&D, and challenging the DM to try and fit it all in and make everybody smile at the same time.
Nice. Yeah, one of the things that struck me, because I know there's a lot nowadays, there's a lot of D&D podcasts and web series and stuff out there, and I'll just kind of randomly tune in as I see them pop up on my Twitter feed, and that's how I discovered you guys. I saw you like posting, and I was like, oh, I'll check them out. And the thing that kind of caught me the most was that you guys have like really good chemistry. Like I was watching them, like they just seem like best friends that came together and they're playing and they're having fun, and I that just connected with me immediately.
And that's really our intention is, we're there to play fun, have fun at the table, but in today's world, people love to see people having fun and want to be part of that in some way, shape, or form, and that's part of what we're trying to accomplish. And we do other sessions as well. We have a couple other shows that we run, one being a world building show that I do on Sundays, where for example, our community comes together and we build aspects of the world together, and then most of the time I name the things after them. So when
Cool.
we're walking through a city or something along those lines, you can stop at, Six of Spades Tavern, or, you meet the other Sir Hawk, who's an NPC that one of our people helped out from the community. So yeah, lots of interactivity, and yeah, we all just love playing together. We've been playing together for quite some time. Some relatively new to the game, some have been throughout the generations. I think they started in 2nd edition or something along those lines. But yeah, no, it's just this bond that we've built over D&D, and we love the camaraderie, and it's much nicer for us to be able to sit down and play a game like this together, as opposed to try and shoot each other on Overwatch over headset. So that's really what we're trying to do.
Totally. So did you play a lot together prior to this series? I mean, were you like running campaigns and stuff together? And then was this like an idea that popped up as like, hey, let's start filming this? Or how did that genesis happen?
Yeah, really how that all came to be is a few of the players we've been playing together for probably 3 or 4 years now. And we've run different campaigns with some of them. Other individuals have come along throughout the years. But really, a lot of the players came on during the COVID stuff. I really thought that, it was probably when we first started with our current group, I think it was May or June, something along those lines. And it was really when things were starting to hit the isolation. People were really starting to feel it a lot more. So, we reached out to some more people and said, hey, we're going to run a short campaign, a series of adventures where it's just a place where you can go and socialize. And, yeah, it's on camera, but at least we can be together, and we'll do stupid things together and have epic moments together that, I can comment and narrate, kind of thing. And everybody really enjoyed it and got along with it. So that's really how our current cast, if you will, came together. In terms of why people, where the whole stream thing came of, one of our players, Alara, who's within the campaign, she always wanted to stream. She always wanted to try it out. And what really sold me was the fact that a few of our other friends had come around and said, you really should record this stuff, because it's really funny. It's really fun. You talk like it's an audio book that we could kind of just listen to for the most part. One of our friends came along and said, just record them so I have bedtime stories at night, and that would be perfect. Absolutely
awesome.
Perfect. Yeah. So really, that's those were kind of the sparks that ignited what is Careful Cantrip now.
Okay, cool. That kind of segues nicely into a question I actually had a little further down the list, but and maybe you already kind of said this, but what makes you unique or different than, because like I said, the kind of ecosystem out there, there's a lot of different web series and podcasts and stuff. What do you feel like some of your main unique features are then, if you summarized them? Or
well, I mean, again, it's I can only really talk to myself in terms of what can be offered, kind of thing. And I think there's an enormous amount of credit that needs to go to my cast, because they're the ones who are helping making this world that I've made up in my head feel more alive. And just the way they interact with the NPCs, and the way they try and strategize around certain puzzles and whatnot. That to me deserves its own credit, but it's something that I can't necessarily talk to on their behalf too much. But for me specifically as the DM, I really try and build as much of my stories as a narrative as possible. I understand that it really is the player's story. It is their adventure that they're going on, and it's going to be their choices that they make. But I am there for the key component of facilitating an immersive world. And really that's where I feel like, and not to speak ill of any other of our companions out there that are running their own games, but I definitely try and highlight that immersiveness as much as possible. Really describing what the colors that they're seeing, and the moments that they're having, the smells that could be around them. The smell of fresh popcorn as they walk through a festival, or the glow of the hues of the purples and burnt oranges as the sun sets, kind of thing. those are where I try and make it as much as a compelling narrative world as possible. And I think that's where I differ a little bit from other DMs out there, because I find they don't really focus on those small details as much. Where it's just kind of like, yeah, you walk in a tavern, there's a barkeep, there's a couple dwarves over to the side. What do you want to do? Kind of thing. And there's nothing wrong with that, but for me to make it as an appealing as a show to not only my players, but to also the people that are watching, I feel it's my due in order to try and give them as much of an immersive experience where, you could be sitting at home watching us, and by closing your eyes, you can hopefully picture and imagine what the rest of us are seeing.
Cool. Yeah. I think that's, especially if you're making a web series, having that, because some people are just listening in, or they want like a bedtime story, like you were kind of saying. That's perfect for that type of thing. They get that, then they get the players interacting and making jokes and things. Yeah, that's cool. That I think that's really challenging though, because like I as a DM, I try to do that as much as I can, kind of try to give good descriptions and stuff, but I find it's really hard, to not say the same things over and over, or get in habits like same descriptions, or I don't know. It's just kind of hard to put yourself in that moment to be like, what would I hear? What would I smell? What would it look like? Do you have do you have a background in that feels like helps you with that?
I do have a little bit of a background. I do have a theater background, as well as a very lengthy creative writing background. So for me personally, it's always been something that I feel that is one of my major strengths, is having the abilities to close my eyes for a second and really focus in on that moment. And that's really what it is. And for any DMs out there watching, don't be afraid of sometimes, you're going to have the same descriptions. You're going to have the same things. Spread them out a little bit so it doesn't sound like you're just repeating yourself over and over again, but really feel yourself in the moment. If you have to, jot down notes beforehand when you're doing your sessions. It's give a sense of, what are the sights, what are the smells, what are they hearing, all of those kind of things within a specific moment. And it's easier to think of them as scenes at that point in time. Like, they go to the festival and then there's a scene there. Okay, what would be seen at a festival, and think about your own experiences, just walking into nature nowadays. That's a perfect example. Just going for a little bit of a walk to give a few descriptions of when your players are in the wilderness. Perhaps you get a scent of a particular flower. Think about that for a moment. Take that in. Be a little bit more mindful of just your overall day to day. And once you kind of start really enveloping that habit, you'll have such an easier time being able to come up with, what they see and what they sense and what they smell on the fly.
Interesting. Yeah, that's like a mindfulness practice almost, like
very important. I feel like, yeah.
Yep.
And not just for D&D. I mean, and for everyday life. I think that we spend so little time really focusing on what's happening around you. It's just always, what happened before, what happened next, or what the hell's on my phone. That's kind of the three options you see nowadays. And I'm not saying, you don't gotta become the Dalai Lama or anything along the line. No one's expecting you to be the next Buddha in terms of your mindfulness. But there are moments, where, there is maybe a little moment of quiet that you can force into your life. And, if you're doing something in particular, like for example, going on a walk or something like that, just kind of take a bit of a note on that. And when you kind of internalize that, it just naturally spews out of your mouth when you're trying to describe things.
Cool. So, I mean, this is a total side tangent type of thing, but do you do any like meditation or mindfulness type stuff?
Definitely. I try and make time for it, at least once a day. I in my job over and above DMing, I live a relatively stressful life in terms of what my overall career is. So I try and make sure that I am focusing a little bit on a day-to-day basis, and just trying to calm things down. and it really isn't about, making myself feel better or anything along those lines. It's just a matter of being able to center myself again for a few moments, to allow for the noise and the clutter in my mind to try and escape just for a couple minutes. And even just for a couple minutes a day, I mean, it does wonderful things for you overall.
Yeah, I totally agree. I got into meditating might have been like 2011 or 2012 or something like that.
Oh wow,
And
yeah. So you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I do, yeah. But although as I've gotten more busy and stuff too, it's like harder and harder to kind of find time for it. So I've been kind of bad about it probably the last like year or so. But I got to the point I got like super excited. I went and bought one of those Muse meditation headbands.
Yeah. Okay.
The little
Yeah.
robot,
Yeah.
like the little
Yeah.
It didn't really do much for me, but it was still kind of cool. I was like, I bought it and I was like, man, I'm such like a nerd. But
honestly, I looked at it too, so don't feel bad. At first, I thought it was going to allow me to try and move stuff with my mind.
I know,
and
right?
I thought this is just the start, right? I think it's there's readings that you get off of it depending on. I think that's how it works. Is that there's an app that goes along with it where you can actually watch where your brain waves are going at a specific time. So I thought, oh, this is Sword Art Online is right around the corner with this thing for sure. I'm looking for my nerve net or whatever they call it, but totally. I think it's really important, and we're kind of off on a tangent now, and that's totally okay with me. But it's especially in today's world, I think that with everything that's happening and just all the, I don't want to call them distractions because that would underestimate and undervalue truly all of the things that are happening right now. But I think that particularly in today's time, that self-care is just so important. No matter who you are or what you do or anything along those lines, if there's so much noise and distraction, and I'm not even just talking about the pandemic that's happening. I mean, God, 2020 was just bizarre of a year, and it's you can get caught up in it so quickly, especially with technology nowadays and social media. There's just, you're always flipping through and it's just one bad thing after another. So, taking a couple, even if it's just 2 or 3 minutes for yourself every day, just to kind of reground yourself and remember that I'm just a human, I'm on this planet. Technology is there and there's all this crazy stuff that is happening, but there's always going to be crazy stuff happening. So, make sure to take care of yourself, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of tie it back to D&D too, is I'm sort of interested now, like I wonder, it's something that would have to be explored. I don't even know if we can really talk about it, but just the, like, what is that meditation, mindfulness practice, being more observant, does that, potentially make you a better DM or give you another kind of power as a DM to channel? Because
that's a really interesting question. What do you think?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think yes, just for the fact that, like you were saying at the beginning, is makes you more observant of your environment, allows you to pick up on those little things, and then when you're sitting at the table, be able to channel that back to your players in some sort of creative way.
Yeah. I think also and for me, it's probably one of the most important aspects of the game for as a DM to run an interesting story for your friends, as well as if you're planning on ever doing a web series, is mindfulness will allow you to find the pace to which you want to run your game at. It will immediately give you, well, not immediately, but if you can really take in the habit of mindfulness, you'll have the ability to slow yourself down and be in that moment and really make it that much more immersive, rather than thinking, okay, well, yeah, I wanted them to go here and now they're over here and I got to get them back to here. And the typical song and dance of every player in DM is the DM is thinking this is what you're going to do, and then they go completely off in the wrong direction. So I think with practicing mindfulness, you get that natural pacing where you can slow things down and you can really focus on what's happening. And the more that you can focus on what's happening as a DM, the more immersive you can make it for your players.
Yeah, I can totally see that. So Okay, so besides mindfulness, are there any other exercises or tools that help you as a DM, or maybe in particular with that creative kind of creative descriptions and stuff? Because one thing I thought of what I thought was interesting, someone mentioned, is they said, try and ask your NPCs questions as the DM, like not at the table. Like pretend your NPCs are in the room with you and you're just talking to them and asking them questions, and then you have to respond back to do some like kind of solo role playing, and that can help you kind of build out your characters ahead of time so that when you come to the table you have a much clearer understanding, like, maybe story related things, but maybe just at a deeper level, like, oh yeah, that NPC really likes, a certain type of food that's totally irrelevant, but that kind of connects you to them, do you have any other things like that, any exercises that you do besides mindfulness that help you?
Oh God. I'm writing constantly. And it's not consecutive in any way, shape, or form. There's no synchronicity within my writings. It's literally blobs of text where I'll have an idea, I'll sit down, I'll write it out, and it could just be something that popped into my head in the shower. But I always try and make a habit of, whenever something like that kind of pops up, always write it down and give a little bit of those, focus in on those five senses. If it's going to be a moment that you think is cool, wouldn't it be awesome if my players were somehow on a cliffside just overlooking a valley, and one of them jumps into the valley onto one of the wild horses' back and rides that into battle with one of the villains, kind of thing. It's stuff like that where, or I watch it on, a movie or something along those lines, and I'll think, okay, how can I incorporate that into my game without being too railroady or anything along those lines? So, I've books and books and books, and I've recently moved over to World Anvil, which phenomenal software for anyone whoever wants to do some world building stuff. But it's just chaos. My articles are all chaos, but it's just point form of just things that I think are cool. And I always have the chance to go and look back on, this might be a cool thing for this session. I'll try and build something like that in where it can either get to that moment or something similar to that kind of moment. I do definitely, I wouldn't say that I practice it intentionally. I do a fair amount of public speaking within my general career, and I think that's definitely an important aspect of DMing. If that's not your thing, then you don't have to worry about it at all. If you're just running a beer and chip kind of game for you and your friends, you don't have to worry about all that kind of stuff. But there's a certain amount of, if you're a well-spoken individual, if you're, explaining your thoughts and ideas in a thorough, concise manner, that it gives a certain validity to the DM. And I think that's important, to have that level of, I don't want to call it authority, but the trust between the DM and the players, that you are the game master, that, you are arbitrating things. So, I think that adds to that overall roles that you put forward between who the DM is and who the player is. And the last thing, who doesn't, as a DM, just practice dumb voices in the car, right?
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Yep. That's like one thing that I'm trying to get better about, because I've always been kind of do voices and stuff like that, but only in the last like couple months have I been trying to push that boundary a little bit more.
Yep.
So that's something.
If there's one piece of advice I can give you, just go for it. If you're gonna go for it, go all in with it, because if you hold back, it's gonna sound so much more strange to the players. You'll feel awkward about it. But if you really just let yourself go into that voice, into that character, it doesn't matter what it sounds like. If you're trying to do a British accent and it sounds awful, the players won't care whatsoever if you're really digging into it. So, don't be afraid. Just go for it.
Yeah. Which I think is great advice, because what I found is I think that might have been last week or the week before, I did something like that. I was just like, I didn't even really expect it. I just started the accent, and I was like, "Oh, I guess I'm doing this." And I was like,
And
okay.
that's the best way sometimes.
And
It probably worked out perfectly for you, and your players probably loved it for you.
Yeah, yeah, it was a interesting moment. But one of the things that's always scared me about that is that like I'll start an accent, let's say, and I have an idea how to start it, but then I'm like, once I get off script a little bit and I'm going into like things I wasn't expecting to say and stuff, it's hard for me to keep the accent going because then I start to forget like how is it supposed to sound if I say this word. You know, maybe that's just me psyching myself out, but
100% it is, because no one pays attention to the sound. Players rarely pay attention to your words. They're even going to rarely less remember exactly the mnemonics of the actual sound of your voice when you're actually doing a silly voice.
Yeah, I could see that.
I got burned one time pretty badly, and it's funny. It's a funny story, but it's just something that I have to deal with forever. So I was doing, I was introducing a new NPC in one of my games. And while I started talking, for whatever reason, my throat decided it wanted to go through puberty again, and my voice cracked. And it was while I was saying something, and everybody around the table just looked and like bright eyes was like, "Oh my God, is this the voice of the individual?" And I thought, I guess it is now. So now I have Wilbo the Wandering Wanderer who walks around the world. And like, that's the voice and they love the character so much now that it's kind of like they want him to be in every campaign that we run. So it's like every now and again, I have to go back to 13-year-old me and do this little break in my voice kind of thing with a little bit of that kind of early British accent kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I mean, that's like a super unique voice. Like that would totally stand out in a game or something. People would be like, "Whoa, like that's totally different. I haven't heard that one before." You know, that's cool.
But that's the thing is that again, it was purely by accident. That wasn't what I was tending in any way, shape, or form. But it became such a memorable character just because I was like, well, we're here now. Might as well put the pedal to the floor, so to speak, and allow myself to sound that stupid throughout the entire time. And eventually, once they really liked it, and there was, it became a reoccurring NPC, and actually what a mentor NPC, as I call them. So they wanted to keep coming back to him, and they wanted to talk to Wilbro, and it was only for the reason that they liked the voice. They couldn't remember half the stuff he actually said. They just thought it was hilarious, and they loved talking to this guy. So, but yeah, I mean, that's the best piece of advice I can give when it comes to voices is that don't hold back. Just go for it. You're gonna sound stupid every time. You're gonna be terrified of doing it every single time, but your players will absolutely love it because they can see your level of dedication and they'll want to play in that world at that point.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. One other thing I thought of too was, so you mentioned you do public speaking, and you have a theater background, right?
Yes.
Okay, so how do you, so one thing I've been wondering, because I don't have a background in anything that's really D&D relevant, I was wondering how much you feel like those assist you, because like one of the things that I was watching like stand-up comedy, and I was like, I wonder if you went and did stand-up comedy, could that make you a better DM? Like, what are these kind of things in the world that have nothing to do with D&D, but they can make you a better DM just by putting yourself out there and doing it? What do you think about that?
I think you're absolutely right. And it doesn't matter if you do, something like Toastmasters, or if you want to go try, going up in front of, a stand-up comedy routine or something along those lines. The only person that holds you back is you. So in reality, if you put yourself out there, that's going to be an experience that you'll never forget. Whether it was, awful and, it was this horrifying, sweat was dripping down your spine the entire time. I can guarantee you that when you get into the DM's chair, and every DM knows what I'm talking about when I say the first time DM sweats, that will be lessened immensely, because it's kind of like, that's not really, it's really not that big of a deal in comparison to, going out and really exposing myself on some level. So I think that, you don't need to have a theater background. You don't need to have a creative writing background. All you really need to do is be able to come up with some cool ideas that you think your friends are going to enjoy. And it's easy. You just play the scene out in your head, or take something that you saw on TV and just rework it. Is it, did you watch one of the Disney movies? And I'm trying to think of one, Lion King. If you just watched the Lion King and you want to include something in your story, which is just a moment that you saw within the story, then just take it, reskin it, and away you go. Tropes are not your enemy in this kind of stuff. I would say that any kind of time that you put yourself out there, it's going to make you a better DM. And every time that you put yourself out there as a DM, it's going to make you a better person. I think that D&D is one of the most wonderful tools for socialization, critical thinking, improv, all of those kind of things that are enormously important skills for anyone to have in just regular life, that you can now harness those skills and build those without even intentionally doing them.
Cool. So take it one more step further. This is going a little bit out there. Probably comes from this mindfulness type of thinking. Is like,
lay it on me, man.
So one other thing I was wondering is, and again, like experimental maybe or something. I've often also wondered about like putting, like, okay, so one example might be like a war reenactment type of thing. I think some people do like LARPing, but maybe even more realistic, like they do that kind of stuff, right? Or even just something simple like go and go on like a wagon ride in the forest or something like that. I've always thought it would be kind of interesting to do like little things like that, and then from that mindfulness perspective, maybe go there with a notebook and like do that experience and be jotting down things to really absorb it. I always thought that would be interesting as a DM to see if that changed, I don't know, your descriptions or how it felt to you in the moment. Makes it more visceral, maybe.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Whether or not you have to bring your notebook or anything along those lines, completely up to you. It's just a matter of, some people are forgetful, some people aren't, kind of thing. But if you do start to try and inhabit that mindfulness, and maybe that's a good place for someone to start, is the fact that you would go out on this wagon ride or something along those lines, and the whole entire focus is to, okay, I want descriptions for smells and sights and the feel on my skin and all of those kind of things. So the fact, and do it under the basis of, hey, I'm writing, I want to make my I want to make my world feel a little bit more alive. I want to make my descriptions a little bit better. That might naturally lead you into learning a little bit more about mindfulness, because if you're taking notes about what you're feeling and what you're seeing at a certain point of time, that's mindfulness, baby. I mean, that's really what it is at the end of the day. So I think you're absolutely right. If that would be an enormously helpful practice for, again, not only yourself as a DM, but just as a person overall, I think.
Cool. Yeah. It's one of those things that I keep thinking in the back of my head, and I'm like, that would be kind of a fun, like, experiment, like kind of a long ongoing. You just make a list of all these like random things you could go out and do periodically. And be really focused on it from a D&D perspective, or a DMing perspective.
For sure. I think also, and this is a little strange, it's just a tool that I use, and I'm not sure how I use it. It just works for me somehow, is I really focus on music. When I'm writing my stories and my adventures and everything along those lines, I like to listen to music intently. And with purpose, because for me personally, I'm a huge music lover. Always have been, always will be. And I try and put on different playlists that will capture certain feelings, whether it be, an epic battle that I'm working on, and I want to put big orchestral epic music on. For whatever reason, it gives me a feeling. And I think about that feeling and I say, okay, how can I capture that within my game, and not only make myself understand it, but have my players have that same kind of feeling behind it. I'm sure it doesn't happen very often with my players, because it's very hard to imbue an emotion on someone from that perspective. You know, you can't really feel music until you hear it yourself, right? But that's you know, and it might be more of kind of a little bit more of an advanced kind of theory behind it or practice or whatever the case is, but utilize those feelings. If you're listening to a sad song, think about the sad song, feel the sad song, and then write down things that, you know, might kind of give those feelings, or just descriptive words or something along those lines, and really maybe you'll start getting some ideas. I have a huge belief in you know, the classic brainstorming stuff, where you just take a piece of white paper, jot a whole bunch of words down on it, and then just kind of go back and look at each word and see if something pops up, and you kind of want to expand on it. The more that you allow yourself to think openly is where you're going to get some of your best ideas from. And I find that with a lot of the DMs that I've talked to, they try and focus on the minuscule things a little bit too much sometimes. You know, you don't necessarily need the name of every single NPC in the town, kind of thing. You don't need to lay out every single store and what they sell and everything along those lines. Realistically, the players will use that as an inventory menu like you would in a video game. Key in on those scenes, key in on those moments that imparts some level of emotional reaction from your player, whether it be that, you know, killing the bad guy and getting that sense of victory and glory, you know, losing a companion that, you know, creates this sad, solemn moment at times, kind of thing. Those are going to be the things that people remember. They're not going to remember, you know, what the price of that magic item was in that town from that guy. They're going to remember those pivotal moments that really matter. So focus in on those as best you can, and the rest just make it up.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. That's something that, like, yeah, we even need to take to heart more, because I worry a lot about, like, probably sometimes trivial things, or you know, like, oh, I got to make sure I've got enough. This town is realistic and it's got all these shops and stuff. Or I'm like, but yeah, you're right. That's not the memorable piece of it. That, you know, yeah, no, I totally get it. That's awesome.
One thing that I do when I'm building my towns, there's sometimes, if the town is something that they're going to be there for a relatively long time, then yeah, I'll think about just the general area around them. But I never try and build more than I'm going to use. I call it more of, for those of you who are into technology, you'll understand the concept of either agile development or waterfall development. And for those who aren't in technology, waterfall approaches is basically saying, here's the grand design, here's the big picture. Now let's build it and build it and build it. And really, it's two things happen, is that you get so bogged down with everything you're having to build, or it never gets released, or it gets redundant. And it's the same thing when it comes to world building. I always try and build from the ground up. I only build if I need a tavern this time, that's the only thing I'll build. I'll build a tavern and the road that goes in between. The rest just make up, and it's terrifying at first, but you'll start to feel the groove of improv. You'll start to be able to come up with characters on the fly. And, you know, the more that you write just the small snippets of things down, which are going to be so much more interesting for you to write. And I'm sure, you know, Sam, the same thing kind of happens to you when you're trying to flesh out these large, you know, cities. It gets to the point of where you're like, man, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to write about this stupid, you know, tavern or butcher or whatever the case is, but I feel like I have to.
Yeah.
No. Write what you want to write, and do it often. And if it excites you and you're excited about writing it, keep going. If it doesn't, then put it on your shelf and worry about it another day, because you can always come back. And if you keep continuing with these type of practices, you'll have so many cities built and so many things built over time that you really just have to plug them into where you need them to be.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting way to visualize it, because I think that's true. The more you DM, the more of a backlog you kind of build up that you can draw from, and I really like that plug and play type of visualization. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, it's the way I look at world building is I'm actually building all of the puzzle pieces and putting them into the box separately. It's my player's job to put that puzzle together in whatever order they want. I'll show them the puzzle pieces that they need for the next section, whether it be the corner or the middle.
Yeah.
But that's all I really need to do. And then I find that the players not only really enjoy it because they feel like this world is alive, because it's not, the same standard things. Because eventually, if you're doing the large town build repeatedly, things are going to start feeling the same because you just naturally run out of ideas, and that's just the way it goes, kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're introducing just strange concepts here and there, it makes the world feel a little bit more immersive, a little bit more like it's a breathing world itself, rather than a stock town that just kind of got dropped in the center.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like I think that's a funny analogy in my mind is it's a puzzle they're putting together, because then the players always go off in their own directions and things. So you come back and the puzzle's like a bunch of pieces jammed together that didn't go together.
It really has. Yeah, that's exactly what it is sometimes. And sometimes, they might go completely outside the lines and start a brand new puzzle that I wasn't even thinking of.
Yeah,
but
puzzles
generally,
merging together. Yeah.
I take when I think of a session, I take 5 puzzle pieces at random, I put them on a piece of paper and say, that's my session. And then it's just a matter of tying that all together. And most of the time is that once you get the ball rolling for your players, they're going to go and do it themselves. Again, it's their story. It's not your story. You're just creating the world that the story happens in. Mm-hmm. Again, it really depends on if you're running more of a sandbox type game or a railroad type game. But I think there's a certain amount of, even if you are running a railroaded game, there's things that you can do as a DM that allows it not to necessarily feel like a railroaded game. And it's something interesting that I do with my villains in particular. And we can kind of get into that, but because I'm kind of going off on a tangent. But again, I think, the stranger the things are, the more that people are going to remember it, the more they'll want to know about things. And it just the more hooks that you can get into your players with whatever you're doing at that point in time, the more they're going to want to come back to the table again and again and again.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So this is a question that I've asked other DMs and thought quite a bit about myself. Is, well, first off, one piece of it is just like, do you have a preference on like dungeon master versus game master versus storyteller versus host versus whatever else? There seems like a lot of different terms.
That's a really interesting question. I've never been asked that before. I like to... It's a joke that I have with my players is don't look at me as the dungeon master. Don't look at me as the game master. I'm the big fat universe. That's all I am. So I guess from that perspective is I'm more of like the architect kind of thing, where it's just kind of like I really don't have a preference over who lives and who dies. I don't have a preference or a way that you want to go about telling your story. I'm here just to facilitate. I'm kind of the boundaries person. So I guess in a sense it would be I'm just the narrator. That's really all I'm there to do. And then when it comes to the actual game function, then obviously I'm the adjudicator in terms of that. But it really is just a sense of knowing how D&D is structured and how you go about doing the dice rolls. So it's not really something that it takes a little while to understand how to do it, but once you kind of get it, it's either you're rolling for combat, you're rolling for saves, or you're rolling for skills, and that's all the players really care about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been the reason I asked that question too is because I've been kind of searching for maybe it started with like trying to describe D&D to people that have no idea what it is, and you're like kind of can do it, but it's never really a satisfying explanation. And I always end up just telling them like, you just have to play it. Like I can tell you stuff, but like until you play it, you just have no idea what I'm really saying. But I've been looking, kind of searching, like, there's got to be a really, really good analogy out there. And it involves, words like facilitator, or, you're kind of like the world, you're almost like the system, like a game system kind of, but that sounds very mechanical. Like,
yeah.
You're the narrator or the director of a movie. I've been trying to figure out, like, what is like.
So you're talking about just describing yourself as the DM.
Yeah, exactly.
Or are you explaining to people how would you introduce D&D to a new player?
Well, okay, yeah, I guess those maybe are two separate things, and I'm speaking a little bit more on the side of like, how would you describe? I guess the DM's position as like a narrator, or sometimes I thought of it like you're almost kind of like the author of a book, but you're writing the book with a group of people, or maybe you're the director and they're the actors, something like that. But
I think the best way, if you really want to hook someone, and again, this is just a little bit of my sales life kind of sticking out a little bit to kind of really hook someone to get their interest. One thing that I don't know how much you kind of look into the history of the game itself, and not so much the lore and everything along those lines, but the actual history of the game. When Gary Gygax initially wrote the role as the Dungeon Master was never supposed to sit at the table.
Oh, okay.
It was supposed to be this disembodied voice that is literally the narrator, and that's how he would run his games. He would literally stand behind like a partition and do his dice rolls from behind there, and when the players wanted to engage, that's where he talked from. So if you really want something cool to say to hook people, tell them that the DM is the man behind the curtain.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
I feel like that would really that would give anybody a moment.
Especially if you left it very vague like that, they'd be like, what?
Just leave it at like that. Well, I don't understand. What do you do in the game if you're not one of the players? I'm the man behind the curtain.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would
or
be...
woman,
yeah,
or
of course. Yep.
Whatever pronouns that you use. Just, if you want to be the orc behind the curtain, that's cool too. No worries.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. Cool. Okay. Let's see here. Let me take a look at the actual script that the questions that I
absolutely.
had.
I like having these just open conversations kind of thing. So this is me. It's just I love talking and conversing with people about D&D and their experiences and all that kind of stuff. So to me, I mean, if you got questions, by all means, but I'm happy just chatting with you as well.
Yeah. And I love this kind of stuff too. I did want to ask you about your, so I was looking at your Facebook group, and you had, or Facebook page. Is it a group or a page? One of the two.
I have no idea. I'm just the big fat universe, That's, I don't do that stuff.
Well, the Facebook, whatever it is, there is a picture on there of I believe it's the world you're using. And actually, let me pull it up on my laptop here. So I think it has like, correct me if I'm wrong, it looks like there's a number of different, I don't know if they're continents or just big islands but like Oral, Mulshire, Mornitar. I don't know if I'm saying those right.
You're doing pretty well. I mean, for what it is. So there's Arel. Arel is really your, what I did was I never wanted to be limited within my world in the types of campaigns that I wanted to run. So essentially what I did is I created a continent for various facets of types of campaigns and the themes that I would run behind that kind of thing. So somewhere where Orel is very much your typical medieval fantasy in kind of the main area or the center continent. A little bit to the north of that there's a bit more of the Viking Nordic kind of feel to it. There's another country that's 100% dedicated to monster races. So if my players ever want to play a game where they play as either orcs or hobgoblins or minotaurs or what, we actually just did our Christmas special last night where they played in the nation of Droam, which is basically the monster races. And the whole thing was that the evil villain went and kidnapped Krampus, which is what they worship over there as their patron for the winter solstice. So
cool.
So yeah, each one of my continents kind of have a very unique feel depending on what type of game they really want to play. So I can kind of point to any of them and say, well, Roshan, well, that's more of the dark sun setting, kind of apocalyptic, the Mad Max Conan kind of feel to it, very gritty kind of thing. Where Lumnador, the floating continent, is very high magic, elven kind of things. That's where the Feywild would probably be. So really that's how I segregated out my continents, because I wanted to have that ability to throw whatever I wanted onto any one of the continents.
Okay, cool. Is that will these continents all come up during the Careful Cantrip series, or with the same characters, or are these like totally different campaigns that would happen, or some of them will just be used for maybe one shots, or what do you think? And maybe you can't answer that because there's some...
Without going into any kind of spoilers, like for example, and this wasn't really a spoiler because it happened in our previous campaign. So we got to the point to finish off our campaign that was just prior to the stream starting. We had a couple players who were like, I'm not really comfortable streaming, so we're gonna tap out at this point. So I just thought it's probably best to, for the sake of the actual stream and people being comfortable and feeling okay about what they participate in, I just thought, okay, we're gonna end this adventure or a little campaign here, and then we'll move on to a brand new one. But what I did at the end of the campaign, they killed the big bad, they were completely wrong in what they did and screwed up a bunch more stuff in the long run, because that's how my players do things, and basically set loose all of these horrible, evil, malevolent spirits onto the world. This all was taking place within the continent of Varel, and the characters, that one of the characters was like, oh, my main goal is to become part of a sorcerer society, to really build up my knowledge and skill and really become that what my potential could potentially be. So at the very end, we hadn't talked about it in a very long time. I just dropped it on him that the sorcerer he had been talking to in his own mind appeared directly in front of them and said, it's time for you to come and train. Who would want to come and join this? And some of them were like, yeah, we'll come, and we'll maybe, don't know, whatever the case is. But the last thing that I said within the campaign was the sorcerer said, all right then, well, off to Qatar. So there could be instance where they actually run into some of their old players that they played as NPCs. Now, whether they do or not, there's a certain amount of spoilers that I don't want to give up at this point, but that option is there. So I always try and make sure that there's elements from each one of the campaigns I play in or run, that it overlaps some element of some of my previous campaigns. So some of the players that have been at the table for a long time, they might hear something and be like, oh my God, I know what he's talking about. That's exactly, I was there. That happened. I remember that. Or alternatively, it could be, something that they've never heard of before, and I touch on in this campaign that's they'll hear about 2 years from now, and whether they remember it or not. But it's, again, I try and make it of as much as a living world as possible that they truly can make a mark on.
Yeah, those are exciting moments when they remember something from a long while back. Or I think it's really fun too when players have their own knowledge that other players don't have. I think those are really fun moments because they feel really special too, right? Like, ooh, sure, I have something really cool that I know, I get to share it with the group. That's a fun moment, I always feel like.
Yeah. I also, I tell most of the players that have been playing at my table for a long time is that each campaign we run is part of an epic story. So there's going to be things that happen within the campaign that might not matter at that point in time at all, but if you look at the grand story overall, then it all kind of falls into place, and it's all leading to this massive overarching storyline. But it's segregated on its own. I try not to make it dependent on the campaign that we're running, but I can always just put little bits and pieces there to foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is every DM's best friend.
Cool. So it sounds like with your, and maybe the web series versus doing this just on your own, I don't know if there's a difference here, but do you do a lot of preparation to get all this together? Because I was talking to one DM recently who his methodology is like almost entirely wing it at all times. Like he says, if you're doing more than a couple hours of prep, you're way over prepping. And I was like, whoa, I prep a lot. I'm like, am I doing something wrong? So, but I think there's just different philosophies on it. He runs much more sandbox. Would you describe yourself as you run more like prepared narratives, but you can go off script and stuff, or how do you look at it?
Yeah, the way I do my prep is, again, going back to the whole jigsaw puzzle piece, is that I'm always prepping. I just don't necessarily think it's for my necessarily for my next session, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm always world building. I'm always thinking about cool elements to fit inside my world. And that's what keeps it fresh and interesting to me, is the fact that I never really I never have to sit down and be like, oh, okay, I gotta plan 3 hours worth of stuff. Well, okay, maybe I can do this. I can put this puzzle in here, maybe a riddle, but riddles are hard and I don't want to think about all that kind of stuff. So there's a certain amount of, I just take things that I think are cool and areas and cities and whatnot, and I say, okay, maybe they'll go here. And I won't name the city at all. I won't give it any kind of characteristics. And then depending on where they go on the road, I might just pull it out and say, okay, this is the one. I feel like that is something that DMs that do a lot of prep, they find themselves a little too stringent. And the more prep that you do for a session, the more panicked you'll get when they go off script. I think that's something that everybody runs into in terms of when you're developing these kind of adventures. But if you just kind of take it from the perspective and be like, okay, I want them to go to a dungeon. They might talk to one or two people, and then maybe throw in some cool wilderness sessions. If you start and use that as your model and then just kind of pull off things that you've thought of in the past and plop it in there, then you're always prepping, you're never bored, and you're never panicked as to what happens next, allowing you to have that feel for that sandbox kind of feel, even though the intention, you've already put it forward kind of thing with it's here's the template of the dungeon that I'm putting them in today.
Interesting. Yeah, that's good. That's a good thought for me, because like one of my goals in 2021 is to run some more sandbox style games, and I've been trying to think of like ways to approach it and stuff. And I think that can be a helpful way to think of it, as just having, kind of going back to what you had mentioned before, having things that you can kind of pick and pull in. And I like the idea of you're always preparing, you're always thinking of stuff, and then you can draw from it. It's not that you're specifically preparing for what's this next one shot or next part of the campaign or whatever it is.
Yeah, and I think it's the fact is, if you're always prepping, and when I say that, it's building those templates, right? It's sitting down and saying, I just came up with this cool idea for an NPC with no intention for the NPC, just writing it down and putting it within your vault or archive or whatever you want to call it, and then you can draw upon it at any point in time. And the nice thing is, and especially when it comes to a sandbox, you really can make sandbox railroads. You can easily do that, just as long as it feels sandbox. It feels like because the one thing you never want to do is take away player agency. You take away player agency and you've lost your table immediately. So if you just go based on what they want to do and then pull 4 or 5 things out of your archive, then it always feels like they're in control. They're going to a certain place, and they think that it was always intended to be that way. I've got a ton of different themed dungeons that I've built in the past, that I'll just pull out at random when I need them. So that if the players are like, I'm going to walk to the west and just keep walking until I find something, then it's kind of like, well, no, I had you planned to go to the north and do all this kind of stuff. And that, no, let them go to the west and then just take the dungeon from the north and put it over here. There you go. Yeah. So it's if you build it based on these little plug and play ideas, then you can railroad and you can prepare an entire session just you don't necessarily have to give them specifics on things. And then when they run into things, you'll look amazing. You'll be like, oh, we totally went off script. You told us to go here and we thought we were going to screw with you and go over here, but you had that all planned out. How much of this world do you actually have built?
Yeah.
And it's like, I have nothing built. I just have little things here and there that I can throw in.
Yeah, totally. Cool. So when you're building up these worlds and you're getting prepared and stuff, do you draw your inspiration from anything in particular? Is it just like all sorts of different experiences throughout your life and stuff, or do you have like maybe certain genres that really can connect with you or anything like that?
Yeah, so I have a central theme that I just kind of focus on for when I'm running games, and it's my own personal thing. I do like a lot of pulp fiction. So stories from the old comics that you see from way back in the day. What's his name? Savage Adams, I think his name is, or the Phantom, or anything along those lines. To me, D&D is the most exciting in those moments, and Pulp Fiction really highlights those moments. Running on the top of the train to avoid to catch the train robbers, or being caught up within that particular moment. So I always kind of use that as that's where I want to put my basis of the feel of my game overall. Mm-hmm. But in terms of inspiration, I take inspiration from very strange places, and maybe it's just me, but like a lot of my inspiration comes from the Nature Channel, because I don't think there's anything stranger than nature. Mm-hmm. You learn something about this creature where it's just kind of like, that's just so bizarre. And I'll give you an example. Is we just did an NPC villain that we built, and I had a general idea of this Luxodon, which for those of you who don't know is like an elephant kind of race, that was a necromancer. And that strictly came from the whole idea of, well, elephants always go back to their graveyard that their ancestors had. So I thought, what if they went back with the intention of building power around that? That would be kind of a cool thing. And then we eventually ended up making Tusk, the Lord of Bones, who is going to be this crazy necromancer villain within the campaign. So I always think that art imitates life all the time, and you can get such cool inspiration from that. And then, you can always find, if you're looking for interesting way to say things or give a little bit more cool dialogue, comic books always, they have those speech bubbles for a reason, and usually they're longer than hey, how are you? Good, how are you? So it's usually, Captain America goes off all the time. So finding a character within the comic books that fits the NPC or villain that you're trying to do, and then look up some of their comics and just read some of their lines, and that will give you great inspiration and be like, oh man, that's such a cool line. So for dialogue, that's something that I always use. And then when it comes to describing things, I just try and remember moments that I've had, because that's what everybody can relate to, going back to the whole idea of describing the senses, because that's going to help with the immersion. Smelling burnt hair, that's a big one, because someone's always going to cast fireball. So when someone hit the villain in the shoulder, a bit of their hair begins to set on fire, you immediately get this sickening sense of burnt hair. That's going to have an impact, rather than you hit it with a fireball, go ahead and roll damage.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've noticed too with myself recently is like I've been trying to spend more time just thinking about Dungeons and Dragons and being a DM and how I can improve my skills and stuff like that. And I've noticed that I don't even know exactly what it was, but like some sort of shift mentally where I'm looking at everything, regardless of what it is. It doesn't have to be fantasy related. It could be anything. I'm looking at it through a lens of like, how could this be related to D&D? How could this help me with being a DM? And I've noticed there's all sorts of like really random things out there that you're like, ooh, like, earlier today I was sitting with my parents, we were watching the NFL, and I'm even weird things like that. I'm kind of like just watching, and like there are a bunch of brutes out on the field running around tackling each other. In my mind I'm thinking, like a bunch of barbarians and they're at this battle, and I don't know. It's just that's been a game changer for me in a sense.
Absolutely. And I mean, going to your example, try and put yourself in the headspace of that quarterback, leading the charge kind of thing, what he must be feeling, looking out amongst his warriors kind of thing that are ready to engage in bloody battle with this opposing force. And, how would you feel about, being the one in charge, calling all the plays kind of thing? That kind of stuff is, that's where the moments come from. And if you can describe those to your players, if there's someone who's taking a natural lead, think of them as the quarterback, think of them standing with the line of individuals standing in front of them, waiting to take brutal punishment to their bodies on their behalf kind of thing. That's, but seriously, I mean, those are the moments that people already want to be the quarterback. They already want to be, the Jedi warrior or the Gandalf or the Argon kind of thing. So just give them what they want kind of thing, and they'll tell you, maybe not directly, but they'll tell you what they want to do, what they want to see, and listening to your players is such an important thing that I find is, some DMs don't do as much, and not any fault to theirs. They're just too focused on what's happening next, or what do I have to do next, or something along those lines. If you listen to your players, they're going to tell you exactly what's going to make it the best game possible for them. All you have to do is listen. Yeah.
And I've noticed too, like, as you DM more and more and more, a lot of things start to become almost like automated, or like they become so memorized, you start to free up mental space for like other important things like that. Once you get the rules really, really figured out, memorized and stuff, you don't have to worry about it anymore. Now you can shift all that mental energy towards, working, listening to your players and making sure that their backstories have like an interesting component with the story that's going on, and they can get excited about that and stuff.
Yeah, I kind of left that out. Absolutely. If you're new to DMing, learn the rules. You don't need to really dive into, okay, what does flanking do versus what happens if someone's prone, and what's, what about all the conditions and whatnot. The players aren't looking to you to be the encyclopedia of D&D rules. There's no problem stopping and saying, oh, hold on, let me look this up. I do it on stream all the time, where it's kind of like, oh, we have to look up a spell, because there's no way in hell I'm going to be able to memorize the hundreds and hundreds of spells that every single class can take. Really what it boils down to is, know how the combat system works, in sense of, okay, you get a movement, you get an action, you get a bonus action. Then just let them do whatever they want, because they're there to do epic things. They're going to enjoy themselves the most, and that's your job as a DM. Your job is to make it the most fun for your players possible. That doesn't incorporate rules. If you throw rules out the window, who cares? As long as people are enjoying themselves, they're going to leave the table thinking, man, that was a lot of fun. I've never had a player come back to me and say, oh gosh, man, remember that one time when you made that ruling? Oh, that was amazing. No player's ever going to say that. They might be upset if they don't like your ruling at a certain point of time, because, you hit them a little too hard, or they wanted to do something stupid like jump and wade into lava or something along those lines. Give them within reason kind of thing, unless they're level 20, and then just let them do whatever they want. But yeah, I mean, that's really what it is. Just learn enough of the rules to keep the game going. Because again, going back to my point, pace is so important. And if you have to stop to continually look up rules or do all that kind of stuff, just fall back on the most important rule in D&D in my mind, and that's the rule of cool. Was it cool? Did you think it was cool? Did your players think it was cool? Then it happened.
Yeah. That's one of the things I try to make clear in the DM training that we offer, is that like one of the biggest takeaways from it is like don't get so caught up with trying to memorize everything or get everything perfect or whatever. Like, you can do this. Try to build confidence during the training. Like, you don't just go with the flow, keep the pacing going, have fun. I like the rule of cool idea. That's a great way to put it. And get them away from that mentality of like, ooh, what if someone calls me out, or what if I get the ruling wrong, or don't. Your friends are going to be so happy that you just took the time to run D&D.
Right? Yeah. No, absolutely. And again, you're going to run into rules lawyers sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to happen. Most of the time, if they're new players that are just joining in 5e, they're not going to be rules lawyers because they don't care about the rules. They heard about it from either yourself and the cool. No one's sitting there describing how cool the rules are. It's oh man, we played this great game of math the other day for like 3 hours. It was amazing. No one has those conversations, right?
Totally. Yep.
So really, if you're a new DM and that's kind of what you're learning and you're a little worried about that kind of stuff, don't bother. And at the end of the day, I mean, you're the DM. It's your table. If someone wants to argue rules with you, just have rocks fall on them.
Yes. All right. Let's see. I was curious if. So it sounds like you've probably just you and your friends have been playing D&D, like 5th edition and stuff. Was there any other considerations? Like, did you ever think about like Pathfinder or anything like that, or were you doing different editions at one point, or was it like, hey, we're gonna do Careful Cantrip 5th edition automatic? That's the automatic choice.
I think I did when I first started looking at systems, I thought about going with Pathfinder 2nd edition. But when I kind of looked at it again, being someone who absolutely hates rules, I thought still a little too crunchy for me. It's still a little rule heavy in comparison. So that's where we kind of landed with 5th edition. Same with looking at some of the older editions. I do play in a game that most of the guys that play in it were coming from 3.5. And they're not huge fans of 5e because it is so loose. And it's like, well, no. Like, this spell should be 3 pages long in terms of description of how it works and what it does and all of that kind of stuff. And in 5th edition, it's like 1 sentence. So how am I supposed to know what to do? And it's just kind of like, no. Just do whatever you want. That's the point. So for me, I think for the sake of the element of the cinematics, in terms of the beautiful chaos that D&D can be, 5th edition really is the home base for me.
So would you say it's correct to like 5th edition is more focused on like the performance piece of it than like the mechanics piece, like
100%.
compared to 3.5, for instance?
100%.
Okay.
5th edition really took those 3 pillars and evened them out. I find that every 3 and 3.5 player I play with, they're always min-maxers. Gotcha. Every single time when they go to make a character, and we're running our session 0 or whatever the case is, they always are like, okay, well, I want to be able to do this, and so I'm going to need these magic items and this, and they're always talking about what the min-max potential of their characters, where I stop them and I start really diving into their backstory. I say, yeah, it doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want over there. Multi-class. The prerequisites for multi-classing, I don't care. Do whatever you want with that. We'll talk about magic items as they come up. Let me know if there's something that you want, kind of thing. And they're taken aback by that, and they're like, so you're just going to let me do what I want? It's like, yeah, that's the point of role playing, to allow you to do whatever you want within the confines of what are the loose rules of 5th edition. 5th edition to me is bringing back that element of role play that had been lost a little bit in 3rd edition and previous editions. And I'm not trying to badmouth any of the other editions except 4th edition, but we don't talk about 4th edition, right? But I think that Chris Perkins and Mike Merrills and the guys over there at Wizards of the Coast, they looked at what the elements of people going away from the table at the end of the day and saying, talking about the stories that they had been on, and the adventures and all of those kind of things, and what makes for a good story years after the actual campaign had happened. And it is those moments where you really embody that individual or that character, whether it be, you're killing that foe, or maybe you're finally finding your lost parents, because every D&D player is apparently an orphan. It's those moments that really last the most. So them taking 5th edition, they're saying, okay, let's not put so much limitations on it. Let's give it the ability to tell a cool narrative, a cooperative narrative at the table, because those are the kind of moments that people are going to remember forever and continue bringing them back to the table.
Mm-hmm. Do you think if they release a 6th edition eventually, that will still be... You think 5th edition is they kind of figured it out, and 6th edition will be, I don't know, whatever, just more content and some improvements and things like that? Or do you think they would ever take it again in a kind of a different direction?
I think that, well, 2 comments on that. My short comment is the fact, I think I think Tasha's, with the release of Tasha's,
oh yeah,
that's enough in there that I would think that they're play testing for 6th edition. I would honestly, based on the changes and the variety and the customization, that is literally our first look into where 6th edition is going.
Mm-hmm.
Love it or hate it, I understand both positions. I was on both sides of the fence when I first heard about what they were doing to like race customization and everything along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
And at first I was kind of like, I was part of the don't ruin my game kind of, holding up the picket signs. And after reading through Tasha's, I think that my views on that have completely changed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that if they give it's a fine line, right? You want to give as much customization to a player as possible, to give them as many options as they want, so that they can play the exact character that they want to play. Why stop them from doing that? You're only hurting the table at that point in time. If you want stringent rules, go play a video game. That's what they're there for, right?
Yeah.
But I think that the fine line sits of, as long as they can keep it structured, like as long as they never get rid of classes per se. You do need those mechanics to give that individual feel and that different feel, and give you a base point of either how you want to play your character, or how the role playing aspect comes into play with all of it. So I 100% think that they are playtesting 6th edition now. I mean, that's exactly how they've done it in the past. They have an edition out for quite a period of time. Then they start introducing these new concepts into supplement books, and lo and behold, a year or 2 later, all of a sudden a new edition comes out, and the rules that they were playtesting in the supplement stuff is now being incorporated into the new edition. Also the fact that the amount of unearthed arcana that's coming out, that is not necessarily just always subclass focus or spell class. They're actually playing with mechanics within the game. I think that's a pretty good indication that they're starting to really think about 6th edition.
Interesting. Yeah, my talking about the Tasha race stuff too. Yeah, my initial reaction was the kind of the same thing. I was like, ooh, this sounds like, I hope they're not just tearing this thing apart, and like,
yeah.
But I, honestly, like when I thought about it for not even really that long, I just started thinking about it. I'm like, well, actually it adds a lot of like depth to the game.
Have you read through the all the stuff that got included into Tasha's, like the actual written component of it?
No, not yet.
So there was 2 things that I found interesting. That one, I don't think that, and this is where I'm worried about 6th edition, and going back to my point of making sure that there's clarification for at least the DM. They gave an example, and it was an optional rule, but they would allow a player to literally, you know, if they were a wizard or something that had focused on necromancy, they fall asleep under a great tree that's dedicated to a god of divination. They wake up the next morning and they have completely forgotten everything they ever knew about necromancy and can now do all divination spells. Essentially, they changed their school through a dream in one night. So it's stuff like that where, and they left it really loose from that perspective. And I was kind of like, you could have given a little bit more rules about that, because that doesn't, to me, it's, again, it's about the fact that you're playing a cooperative narrative with your friends, right? So the story has to make sense. Because if you just throw everything out the window, then it's a little bit too much of chaos at that point. And I love chaos, don't get me wrong, but it's got to be chaos that at least kind of makes sense for the narrative that you're telling. So I think that there's elements to it where it's kind of like, yeah, give us a little bit more detail or give us a little bit more rules on it. You know, it takes a certain amount of time or a certain amount of gold. Leave it up to the DM what that time and that gold is, but that's kind of the standard, as opposed to, well, I drank out, a cleric drank out of a stream of a nature god, and now all of a sudden their whole domain changes overnight, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I hope that they would treat that as like, this is an optional idea you could use that we're providing to you to help you bridge that gap. I hope it's not like, I hope they don't treat that as like, this is how it works now, and like that's sets the player's expectations. They could do that in any DM's game, because I personally wouldn't like that as a DM.
Yeah, I think there's a certain amount of, when it comes to what they're doing with potentially 6th edition, I don't know, this is obviously all speculation. But really what it boils down to is, I like you giving me all these options to play the game as I want to play it, kind of thing. But at the same time, don't take away the rulings enough where I now have to be the one to come out with my own rules. Because homebrew rules are one thing, and understandably you can tell your players at session 0, here's my homebrew rules, here's how I play it, kind of thing, and that's fine, kind of thing. But you have to have a standard, or else everybody is now playing a different game, and it's hard to go from one table to another if you have fundamental changes that aren't being discussed and agreed upon by the collective, as opposed to each individual running their own thing.
And it would make me concerned that, like, when you do stuff like that, there's probably always a risk of the community becoming fractured. And then, I mean, I don't know if people would ever like fork D&D or something like that, or they just switch game systems because they're fed up with, you know, going by zigzagging around or something like that.
Yeah. And you know, there's a lot of animosity in the community already, just centered around the Tasha's race stuff, which I really don't understand. It just seems like such a silly argument from both sides. It's the fact is that, okay, how are you upset that, first off, there's years and years of lore centered around D&D. Yeah, orcs were evil for a very long time. The fact that they're turning around and saying orcs don't necessarily have to be evil, that's not a win or a loss for either side. It's allowing a player to play the character that they want. Who cares if you want to let them adjust the stats so that it makes sense to their backstory? Again, it always goes back to the narrative for me. If it makes sense and you can come up with a reason for it, by all means. If it was an orc that was raised with gnomes and he's the happiest orc you've ever known, and you want his charisma to be super high for that reason, why is it a bad thing that there's rules that you can do that now? Right. You know, I really don't understand that, and it's really not that big of a deal in the first place to me, that they're allowing these kind of things. You know, I would have probably done it naturally if one of my players came to me and said, "Hey, I've got this really cool idea for a character that I want to play." If that's what they're doing, then the rule of cool, right? Just always goes back to the rule of cool. Just it's your job as the DM to balance it out, but otherwise, let them do what they want to do, man.
Yeah, I feel like it doesn't change a whole lot in my perspective, in the sense that a lot of my games have already historically included these quote unquote evil races like goblins or orcs and stuff like that as like I don't know. They weren't always evil in my worlds. They were always they've always been like complex, kind of like you could go and run into a goblin, and they're like a lot of times my goblins are running like businesses and stuff like that. They're like you can work with them and you can talk to them, and to me that's always just seemed kind of cool. So and maybe that's then I'm kind of biased where it's like it doesn't necessarily affect me that much, But for other people, maybe they've got this long lineage probably of like. These are how the worlds were, and this totally changes that and upsets it all, I guess.
I mean, the rules aren't saying they can't be evil.
Yeah, that's true, right? Yeah.
And it's not like and this is why I'm now having been on one side, now I'm on the other side. Now I'm kind of saying it doesn't make sense on either side. Like it's not changing anything. They're optional rules that if you want to take into account as the DM, then go ahead. I don't see why you wouldn't, considering that if that's the role that your player wants to do and they can justify it, let them do it. I mean, they're the ones who are supposed to be enjoying the game. You're doing this for them. Mm-hmm. So allow them to do those things. If you want goblins to be evil and that's part of your world and that's part of your lineage, that's fine. But just take into account that elves can be evil or good, or gnomes can be evil or good. It really doesn't matter. It's your world. And that's the part that I love about 5th edition is that they've now allowed me to create the world that I want to build. And hopefully create enough of a world that I think is cool that my players are going to want to play in.
Mm-hmm. I wonder too do you think it affects Adventurers League more, like people that are, because I know that the Adventurers League, they seem to have, I don't know a ton about them, but they seem to have a very kind of, I don't know if rigid's the right word, but like very universal kind of system that you can go to game shop and they all kind of have the same, make sure they're all following like the same rules, and I believe characters can go from shop to shop, and I wonder if this sort of rule really affects that world a lot more because they were maybe more strictly following some other system or
I mean, it's all the adventure. Have you ever played an Adventure League game or ran an Adventure League game?
No.
I'm not saying that it is directly, but it feels like competitive D&D.
Okay.
It's the fact that when you finish when you finish an adventure, you automatically get certain things depending on what tier your adventurer is. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, if you've accumulated this much XP or gold and you're this tier, then you can pick from these 3 or 4 magic items and you just automatically have them, kind of thing. Okay. So from that perspective, I do think that there's a disconnect there between Adventure League and the other stuff. But I think that they're trying to move away from that model a little bit more. Incorporating Tasha's rules, I think is, it does disrupt Adventure League a little bit because it's going to be dependent. So they do have to kind of make a hard and fast rule on that because it is almost like a competitive D&D situation. Mm-hmm. I would agree with you from that perspective that it does blur the line in Adventure League a lot. So if they would need to, and I don't know if they have a specific ruling on Adventure League because I don't run within an Adventure League kind of campaign setting or anything along those lines. But I could see where that might cause a bit of a problem when you are going from shop to shop or mm-hmm. at a convention or something along those lines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, I know, so we've already been going for about an hour and a half, and I want to be respectful of your time. I just got a few more questions here that I wanted to ask you.
By all means. I mean, I'm enjoying myself so far, so right, we can keep hanging out, no problem.
Okay, cool. Well, I just want to make sure because I didn't know if you got, it's Sunday, maybe you got work tomorrow, I'm assuming and stuff. So. But okay, so one thing I wanted to ask you for sure was, do you have like a favorite or most memorable moment from the show so far? Because I think you've done, was today 10 episodes for Careful Cantrip?
So our YouTube our YouTube episode 10 came out today. Okay. Most memorable moment so far, I would have to say there's been a couple of them. and I'll try not to give away too many spoilers in case anybody wants to kind of go back and watch it. But you know, there was a moment where one of our players, that we were kind of doing our Halloween theme kind of thing, and I was running a villain that was this very grotesque kind of witch doctor, and there was just a moment that, as a DM, it was so good to see, because what had happened was they happened upon his hut. He knew they were in there, or sorry, they knew he was in there. They were trying to stealth in. Someone rolled a natural one, snapped a huge stick, completely ruined their plans that they had tried to work out for the past half an hour. So there was that kind of that moment where he was sitting on his, you know, wrecked chair as they entered into it, and they had that moment to engage and have a bit of a conversation. And he had kind of a goblet full of centipedes that he kind of pulled out and let it kind of wiggle around its fingers, and I described it all kind of thing. And as I did that, I looked at the screen to my players, and I could literally see all of them shuddering just how disgusted they were with a moment like that. And it's kind of like, that's so important to me, because if I'm affecting you or your body's reacting just based on what I'm saying, I'm doing a good job as a DM and you're fully engaged. So for me, the most memorable moments are those moments where the players are just so fully engaged in that moment that it takes them away from where they are. They're no longer just sitting at a table. They're really immersed within this world at this point. You know, or they're just doing something silly and stupid. You know, one of my players just recently accidentally kicked on bad information, kicked a young childlike dragon in the face, and knowing that she's such a huge animal lover, you know, and the minute that, you know, the dragon just started bawling its eyes out, and she kind of just grabbed her chest for a moment, like, oh my God, what did I just do, kind of thing. And I could feel her, that moment of, you know, pain within her of being like, oh my God, what did I just do, kind of thing. Those are the moments to me that really stick out, because again, those are the moments that everybody's going to talk about after the fact.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I as most of the time I'm DMing in the community and stuff like that, but I do get to play here and there with some other DMs, and I feel like there's it's so powerful when you nail those descriptions, and you can tell people are really like locked in. And I was playing with shout out to Maple Snuzzles from the community. He was running a little goblin bakery type one-shot adventure, and cool. He just was like, when I played with him, I'm like, man, you are so good at describing stuff. And a lot of it just was the way he described like combat and battle injuries and stuff. I was like, whoa, this is visceral. Like, I feel like I kept kind of, you know, getting caught by it. And that's such a, when you see it on people's faces too, you know, you're like, ooh.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, that's one element of my game. I try my absolute best never to say, okay, roll attack, okay, roll damage. I hate it. You know, I very rarely will tell my players that, you know, yes, you hit. Typically what it is, you know, because that's what engages them a little bit more. You know, there was a moment within our campaign where our players were down in a tomb, and they were facing off this strange, like, the archetype was based on like the Celtic black dog, which has a lot of lore and mythology behind that in terms of their connection with the dead and the spirit realm kind of thing. So it had been kind of poisoned with evil, and they were facing off against the thing. And, you know, an example of how I would go about it was my player, who was a rogue, was like, said, I want to try and hit it with my rapier. You know, and I could have said, okay, go ahead and roll to swing with your sword. But instead, like, you narrate the entire thing, and it's, Eli walks out onto the battlefield, flicking around his rapiers with a sudden smirk, knowing that the battle is about to be engaged, sliding underneath the beast and holding up the swords, pulling down the underbelly and scraping it directly open as parts of its innards begin to spill out to green mucus all over Eli. A little bit getting into your mouth, you get a taste of this strange coppery iron as it kind of wisps across your lip, kind of thing. And those are the kind of things. And then it's just a matter of, they know that they hit. That's not a question whether they hit or not. It's just a matter of, they're like, okay, cool, I hit. And then it's just a matter of, okay, now roll damage, and then I can describe a little bit more about in depths of the injury that it had. But that's kind of going back to the whole concept of trying to run it as much as a cinematic narrative. It's very difficult, especially if combat starts to drag on a little bit, and you don't need to necessarily come up with those very explicit descriptions over and over and over again. But to do it at the beginning of the battle, it gets people engaged. They want to start doing things, and then kind of throwing in moments of contention. I always look at running D&D is all about winding up and releasing tension. And that's how you play with your players on a mental and an emotional level, is that you ratchet up that tension, you give a little bit of release, they think, oh, whew, things are okay, they relax for a moment, and then you really crank it up to 10 at that point in time. And if you can focus on describing that narrative more than just kind of giving the mechanics of it all, those are the things where people are going to sit back and be like, oh man, that was insane.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I think it's like kind of going back to your point you made earlier, is like, you're right, you don't have to give all of those descriptions all the time, but just kind of finding the right moments for them. Yeah, like focus on, like, this is a really good cinematic moment. Now let me lay that on them, and then you can go back to maybe simpler explanations and stuff. And one of the things I've noticed too is there's players out there. I was actually going to mention this, and maybe it's like a mini kind of player training or something where, you don't have to ask for ability checks. I notice some players really like to be like, I want to make this I want to make a perception check, and I'm like, no, just tell me what you want to do. Don't, I want to make a history check. No, well, I want to see if I remember anything about this thing that I ran into. Like, that's what I want to hear. That's more narrative and interesting than the mechanical piece.
Yeah, that's actually part of my session 0. Is that I don't allow anybody to, unless it's an insight check, that I'll allow them to say, okay, I want to do an insight check, because it's hard to describe your own inner monologue of if you don't trust someone or something along those lines. So insight checks I'm okay with, but I will never ever allow them to ask for a specific check. So I've kind of embedded it within my players and at my table, is that you just tell me what you want and I'll narrate everything. And they kind of, even new players at my table, they get a quick feel of that from me, because I'm so disengaged from the mechanics of the game, where I just rely on it based on what the reaction to whatever they're saying is. So I do, don't get me wrong, I do use checks all the time, but it's never to the point. I always make sure that I'm listening to what they're saying, and then depending on what they want to do or what questions they're asking me, that's when I'll ask for the check. And that really embeds in their mind, well, okay, I just need to talk to him, and he'll be the one to decide what the checks are, and rightfully so. That's what the DM's job is. Part of it is to be the adjudicator of the game. And so one of the elements, if you're just learning D&D, focus on what ability checks or what certain things do and how it would fit into the different ability checks. A lot of the DMs that I've seen, they really harp on perception checks, investigation checks, things along those lines. But really I would give the challenge to any DM to try running a session without any perception or investigation checks. And that's going to open you up so much more to all of the other checks, because they can all be accomplished within the framework, so it does make sense. Just disallow yourself from investigation and perception, so you can focus on something a little bit more specific. And when you do ask for those specific types of checks, it gives a little bit more indication and information to the player. So if someone comes to me and says, I want to go take a look at that scroll that had been ripped off the wall, and all of a sudden I hit them with, okay, give me an Arcana check, they're really they're like, whoa, no, you were supposed to ask me for an investigation or perception check. No, Arcana. Now I'm thinking of a million different other things, and now my mind's kind of out there, and I've once again completely forgotten I'm sitting at a table.
Cool, that's awesome. Okay, let's see here. Again, I'm not sure if you can answer this or not, but because of spoilers, are you able to tease us at all with like where the show is heading or anything like that, or is that too revealing?
Yep, I can give you some elements of it. I can tell you, it is very jungle-esque. So they're going to be in savannas, they're going to be in deserts, the mountains, thick jungle, like rainforests and whatnot, coastal cities along the edges. I can tell you that there is a huge theme centered around space and time and how they work together in tandem. For all those, Doctor Who sci-fi fans out there, we have a lot of wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff that's going to be coming up soon.
Awesome.
The one element that I'm really interested to play or see through, and I don't know if any of my players are watching. Hopefully they're not, but something that I think is really cool in the amount of time that we spent on our backstories and we spent on session 0. There's a way that the strings of their lives interconnect with one another, and they don't know it yet.
Ooh.
So there's elements of people's pasts that overlap with others. There's elements of people's futures that are going to naturally overlap with others. And I'm really excited to see those moments happen, because they've built it themselves and they don't even know they've built it for themselves yet. So that's really cool stuff, because those are the moments where it's just kind of like a player will say something about their backstory and another one will just lose their mind, and it's nothing I have done at that point. So those are the kind of things that I'm interested in. It's probably the best of what I can tell. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's very pulpy. It's very anime kind of sensey, very visual from that perspective, and cinematic, which has kind of been a theme of our talk so far today. And there's just a lot more of that to come.
Cool. Awesome. And then do you have any longer term aspirations for the show, or do you see it heading in, is it you're just focused on a web series right now and doing all that, or does this, because I know you're doing some other stuff too, like you mentioned. I think aren't you guys doing like maybe a game night that you're streaming or something like other
we
games?
We don't do other. We were doing a game night where we thought, okay, we'll try and do RPG themed video games and attach that into our stuff. We ex-nayed that project because it's not what our channel's all about. Our channel's all about exposing as many people as possible to different ways to think about D&D. Again, I don't want anyone to walk away from watching one of our episodes and be like, they did a lot of math. cool. Don't know if I'm ever going to play this game. It's probably not for me. I
Yep.
want them to, I want them to almost live vicariously through the players for a little bit with the time at the table, and enjoy it as much as we were, as if they were coming along for the adventure as well. I definitely see a lot more community building that we really want to focus in on. How to get way more people involved, not only in our game potentially, but how they can kind of get themselves a little bit more involved. I think that's I definitely have a unique perspective from DMing, and it's just because I'm so relatively new to it. I've only played my first actual game as a player in the last 6 months.
Oh, wow.
So I really don't know how to play as a player. So really imparting whatever knowledge I can to help make memories for people. I think that's really, to me, that's the most important part of D&D, and what I enjoy the most out of it is the fact that we're a group of friends who enjoy each other's time together, and we're even if they're not necessarily our own memories, they are memories that we'll talk about for a very, very long time. And I think that, D&D, we need to bolster that camaraderie within the community rather than anything else, because that's what's going to drive people to want to play more, and will allow and kind of give people the opportunity to start thinking, hey, this was really cool, I want to try it. Now all of a sudden maybe we're getting more DMs out there. So anything that we can do to kind of support the overall community, that's really where I see us going. A lot of people from the community have mentioned potentially, it would be cool to see a graphic novel of the group. I think that would be a pretty cool thing, and that's probably as far as I've thought out so far in terms of, it would be cool if we could actually, if one day I could see a print version of our characters, that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, that'd be super awesome. I picked up one of the Adventure Zone graphic novels. It's cool to like have listened to part of the pot. I haven't listened to all the episodes, but I've listened to like 60 or 70 of them, and then pick up like the first book and then start to go through, and you're like, oh, I remember this, and it's cool seeing it drawn out, and memorable moments from in the speech bubbles and stuff. It's neat.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest blessings that we've received on the channel overall is when we first started. I think it was only our third or our fourth session. A now good friend of mine joined in, and just as a viewer to watch the stream kind of thing. And he's a phenomenally talented artist when it comes to character art. So being able to sit down with him and kind of give a little bit of descriptions of things, and then him saying, oh, I want to draw this out for, different NPCs or our actual characters, seeing that come to life, and really being able to visualize our ideas in the real world kind of thing. It's such an it's such a blessing, because it goes in line with, we want to get our community involved as much as possible, even if it's just kind of coming and joining us on Sundays to maybe test the waters with world building, or to the extent of what he's done. It's so amazing. So our focus is, we want to meet as many of you as possible. We want to incorporate your ideas and your thoughts into the game as much as possible, and hopefully we can help out where we can with your own endeavors.
Awesome. And that world building thing, that's a really cool piece of it. That happens. Is that every Sunday?
Yep, every Sunday. We generally start around noon Eastern Standard Time. It might be a couple minutes late, but or a couple minutes early. We generally, how it all works is, I'll think of a specific thing that we want to build for the day, or something completely new that, who knows, like the last one we worked on. What did we work on the last one? I think we did either interesting shops, or I think it might have been NPCs. I can't remember directly, but essentially I'll come on and kind of explain basically the structure and the methodologies that we're going to kind of be looking at in terms of the what area of the world that we're building in, and then I just kind of let it loose on the chat, and we sit down and we kind of think, okay, well, we're building villains today. What level is this villain? Are they kind of that big bad? Are they just a nemesis? Are they a plot point? Are they a minion? Something along those lines. So that's what I mean in terms of the structure, to say, okay, here's a template of things that we want to look at, and then we can kind of just get that. It's more for inspiration to figure out how we want to actually start building the overall NPC or whatever the case is. And it's tons of fun. We get a lot of interaction. We have a lot of the community now sending their stuff in to get a helpful hint of eyes, because it's always helpful to get a second set on there. So we'll stop in the middle of the show and we'll look at the links that they've sent over and comment on maybe the magic item that they've created. We'll look at the lore, what the stats are, everything along those lines. So it's a great community of DMs that you can go to and get a sense for, okay, here's an interesting way to do your world building, and participate in it if you just want to dip your toe in the water.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna definitely want to check that out myself, and I'll see if I'll post it in my community's Discord and stuff. Maybe we can. It sounds like something I think my people in my community would be interested in helping, like, because they could learn some new things, they could contribute, feel like part of it.
Yeah, no,
that's
exactly.
Awesome. Yeah.
And then that's really what it is. It's a matter of, if you maybe you want to try world building and it's too, it can be insanely intimidating. If you try and think of it like, I'm going to build a world. Well, but then I have to think of the Pantheon, and then maybe do I have to think about the domains that are involved in there, and how big is this landmass? And it's just, going back to the whole analogy of the waterfall versus the agile, this gives them a view where it's like, no, slow down. This is not a huge issue. Take it one step at a time, build your puzzle pieces, and then when you're ready to run your game, just pull them out and stick them in where you want. It's a plug and play method of world building. So it kind of exposes people to that whole agile method of it, and also gives tons of feedback and allows them to start thinking about things that maybe they hadn't thought of, because we don't necessarily sit down and say, okay, what's their class? What's their race? What items do they hold? What stats are they going to have? We don't talk about any of that. It's kind of like, okay, where did they come from? What's their background? What's their prime goal? Are they part of organizations, or that kind of stuff, where you're really drilling into the meat and potatoes of the character, rather than just being stats on a page, like some characters are.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, where else? Where can people find you, learn more about you? You've got a Twitch and YouTube. I know you got that Linktree thing that's got a nice overview of all the different places. But what do you want to like? What do you want to share or tell people to go?
We're on all the social medias at Careful Cantrip, so you can find us on Twitter, on Instagram, all those kind of fun stuff. If you are semi-interested in maybe joining us in some of the stuff, you can always follow us on Twitch, and that way you get notifications right away. But we also make sure that we post everything on Twitter and Instagram as well. So we have a pretty good team that does all of our social media, that's all I really that's all I can really say on that topic. I really hope that either we see at some of the shows, or alternatively come hang out in one of our world building sessions. We also do it's called Building Character with Raina and Swish Dave, who's another one of the Daves in our campaign. And every Thursday night they sit down and walk through building a character. They randomize a character on D&D Beyond, and then they talk about the backstory, and they talk about maybe some story points around that. So it's not just it's not just the typical min-max in terms of, okay, what do we have to do to make this the most powerful it possibly can at level 20. It gives you kind of thoughts and ideas in terms of how to really engage the role play aspect of the characters.
Nice. All right. Well, for anyone watching on YouTube, I'll make sure that all the descriptions are in the video description below. So just look there, click the little more thingy, and we'll have all of that stuff. So it'll be very easy for you to find it. Otherwise, I think that takes us to the end. So thanks again, Dave, for spending some time here and telling us about yourself and the show and going off on some wild tangents as well.
Hey, no, I had a great time, Sam. Thank you once again for having us. We definitely love what Newbie Sessions is doing right now, and anything that we can do to potentially help in any way, shape, or form because again, it's all about bolstering the community, and if we can do that together, we'd be happy to help out where we can.
Cool, appreciate that. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in as well, and even the YouTube viewers in the future. Let's see. I think that's really it. Yeah, if anyone's watching and you're interested in learning D&D or doing a DM training or anything, just check us out. The main website for the podcast and everything is dndnewbies.com. All the information's there. Otherwise, thanks again and have a great day, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.